Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Good morning, welcome all. Is there anyone here for the first time today? We typically go around the room and say our names, and so start. I'm Jack.
Richard, Snake, Ron, Ed, Peter, Flint, Sharon, Paul, Peter, Harper, Francis, Steve, Patrick, Ian, Noah, Richard, Rick, Cass, Marty, Kay, Bob, Tara, Mark, Doug, and George. Kosho.
Today, Blanch Hartman from the Zen Center, the Zen Center, was scheduled to be here today, and she couldn't be. The Zen Center and people have graciously sent Kosho instead, so we're happy to have you here today.
Thank you.
If you can introduce yourself.
Yeah. Did everybody know Blanch Hartman was going to be here? I was wondering how long it would take before you all realized I wasn't she. We look alike. So she doesn't wear glasses. She had to go to a special conference that she didn't know she was invited to until the day before yesterday, with a whole bunch of Japanese folks. All guys, of course, from the big headquarters in Japan, that from which our school I come from them. So she asked me while I was busy doing something completely off guard. She said, "Would you go and give a talk tomorrow?" I said, We've learned how to say no in Japanese, which is or if we're really desperate, we'll say yes, okay, and get sick or something. So I decided that I would. I thought, maybe something will happen where I'll know if I have anything to say or not. And let's see. So I usually don't live in San Francisco. I live in Tassajara. Anybody know where that is? It's a long way away from here. In mountains, pretty hard to get to, unless you have a four-wheel vehicle with good brakes. So that's where I spend most of my time, and I'm just up here for these last 3 months because I went to a conference. I wanted to go to a conference on Buddhist psychology, and it was in, of all places, Hawaii, that I'd never been to before. And I don't think I'll ever go back either. I was on the Big Island, and there's not, well, I didn't realize how far away it was from where I live. Because when you look on a map, Hawaii is in this little box right next to San Francisco. It is, isn't it? And how far away can this be? But it took 5 hours of flying. But it was a good conference. I'm glad I went. And then these last several weeks, before I go back in April, I'm working closely with my teacher, with Blanch, which involves a ceremony that goes on for 5 weeks. And mostly it's doing full bows. So, so I've just started it, and I can actually hardly walk. I think I look pretty good coming in. You didn't notice any strain. Yeah. It really hurts. Those bows really hurt. So what I thought I might talk about was something that I was surprised to learn about Buddhism, and that was the good news of suffering. And I think we often come to Buddhism because suffering is awful and it hurts, and we want to make it stop or at least get rid of it. And that's a particular way of looking at things, but in the, at least I've certainly seen it in the Japanese strain, but there's a slightly different way of looking at suffering. And the Dogen Kigen is the founder of a particular school that I come from. You might have heard his name before, Dogen Zenji, or Eihei Dogen, named after the mountain that he had his monastery on. But he's very tough. Anybody who can actually read his stuff and make sense of it, I admire. I'm not so good at it myself. He's been called Dogen. There's a book that I bought, the title, which is Dogen Kigen, Mystical Realist. Oh, that sounds so cool. So I did buy the book and never read it, and I don't think I ever will either, because it's very, very difficult. But I always wanted to be a mystical realist myself. And so one of the things that he said that I actually remember, and it's short, it said that the more abundant the clay, the bigger the Buddha. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? If you want to build a Buddha out of clay, the more clay you have, the bigger the Buddha. But like Dogen, what often seems to be the case isn't the case. Because when he's talking about clay, he was thinking of it in its dirt sense. Dirt. Dirty, impure, nasty, painful, suffering, in fact. And I was so surprised when I saw that the greater the suffering, the greater the affliction, the bigger the Buddha. Anybody ever thought of it that way? I never had. And there's another expression used about our relationship with suffering, and it's like a cloud in an endless sky, like a lotus in muddy water. We live in the pure land, the pure mind of Buddha. So a lotus in muddy water, that expression appears a lot in the particular Buddhist life that I live. So there's something that there's something about suffering, I think, that doesn't quite meet the eye. Suffering. Because we definitely, I think, are taught to hate it and to try to do whatever we can to get away from it. I think we're a lot like amoebas in high school and biology in high school. If you ever look at amoebas, as an amoeba, they're really neat. They're very simple. In fact, one of the simplest forms of life that's not too complicated. But an amoeba is really neat in that if there's something that it sort of oozes along. It's very simple, just one cell with a small, thin cell wall, and it sort of oozes. And if there's something here that it goes up to and it wants it engulfs it, and it becomes the amoeba to digest it. But on the other hand, if there's something here and the amoeba is moseying along and it's nasty or dangerous, the amoeba withdraws, contracts. I think we're a lot like amoebas, although we have one other mechanism too, the freeze mechanism. If there's a threat, we'll often try to get away from it or freeze. like other animals have that instinct too. So, at any rate, I think in terms of when we meet suffering, we either want to make it stop or get away, fight or flee, or that other one, freeze. But Buddhism says, let's look a little more closely at that, because one of the troubles with that is that we have this sort of extra thing where our reactions can be habits that we'll repeat over and over and over again, whether it works or not. I mean, I'm not alone here, am I, in this? In fact, the one teacher whom I greatly respect sees that Buddhism, it's mostly having to deal with addictive behavior, where we're very quick to learn a certain piece of behavior or pieces of behavior or complex of behaviors that dealt with an issue that may not really be true anymore, but the behavior keeps repeating itself. For example, if you go into a place where even the fragrance, it smells the same as something before, the whole behavior thing will click in. But I'm sure you know much more about this than I need to keep saying. I think what's interesting in Buddhism is the approach to all this. And I think the key that Buddhism has to offer is the whole notion of acceptance. And I was wondering about that the other day, acceptance. Oh gosh, what do we think acceptance is? I know when I've mentioned it to people when sitting face to face, they often get resentful because they think I mean resignation or approval. Do you know that, don't you? That acceptance doesn't mean approval. It certainly doesn't mean resignation either. Like, I accept this. I'm a goner, or I might as well just throw in the towel. Although that can be a very helpful gesture sometimes to throw in the towel. But what I mean by acceptance is the same thing that happens in Zazen, where you sort of make a deal that you are going to, just for this little while, to be willing to be open to what's actually happening without judgment. How often do we get that chance? I think it has occurred to me that, at least for myself, I don't really need a whole lot of practice in becoming more judgmental or in honing my discriminating instincts. In fact, they're pretty good. But I found that that particular skill happens to get one into a lot of trouble and a lot of suffering. Yes. So Zazen provides like a medicine to that, or an antidote to that, in that you're just willing to sit there and actually let happen whatever happens. Who would do such a thing? I have not been raised or trained to let happen what is happening. One must interfere. One must intervene. One must make it right. You must be in control. Right? Is this not correct? It's not much of a life when you think about it. So Zazen, you can actually sit there for half an hour, 10 minutes, 40 minutes, and pretend, at least, to let things happen. Which is rather big of us, don't you think? We can actually imagine that they wouldn't happen if we weren't here, or if we weren't in charge. Very arrogant stance. So just to sit there and to continually, at least in the Zazen that my school and folks talk about, is to continually go back to your breath and your posture. In other words, when body and mind become one, so often they're at war with each other. The mind is attention, your attention. Breathing and the posture is body. So when the two become one, that's actual real freedom. Real freedom. And end of the war. So just sitting there, and whenever you found you've gone off into a story, any story will do, you just stop it, and then go back to the breathing and posture. That's all. When you do that enough, you find that there is more to life, perhaps, than being in a courtroom all the time. Both as the defendant and what's the other one?
Prosecutor.
Yes. It's not much of a life. It can be exciting, but I wouldn't want to live there all the time. So, there's just one other thing I wanted to toss out. Big words. Do you know Avalokiteshvara? Have you ever heard that? No. So that's a giant word that we toss out just because we can. But what it actually refers to is, let's see, actually my teacher asked me, somebody, apparently we have this website. In Tassajara we don't have website. We don't even have internet, which I've just discovered coming up here, and it's fantastic. Wow. So somebody asked a question on this website. What's it called? Do you know, Rick?
Our website?
Yeah.
Is that our website?
It was the special thing. Ask Dharma. Ask.
Abhi Dharma.
Dear Abhi Dharma. Dear Abhi Dharma. That's a play on this most unintelligible thing. Abhidharma. It's the it's the thing that describes our mind from the Buddhist perspective, and it's a big thick book with hundreds of thousands of lists of what consciousness is. It's horrible, but so Abhidharma. I saw that. I thought that was funny. Dear Abby, dear Abhidharma. So this person asked this question of what is all this in Buddhism about gods and devas and bodhisattvas and these beings and things out there? What is that about? So she asked me this, and I gave her my answer, which she usually she'll ask me the question, I'll give her my answer, and she'll usually sit there and go. And then give me her answer, which was really great because often her answers are really good. And it's kind of a pleasure when your answer turns out to be the wrong one, and it's all right because the right one is so much better. What she said was that out there? Who says out there? The Buddha doesn't say there's any out there. I wanted to say that they're in here. But she said, no, they're not really in here either. So think about that. The Buddha is not necessarily an out there or an in here, but that face that you see in the mirror in your bathroom, well, that's the Buddha. So one of the things about like an archetype, archetypes. So Avalokiteshvara is an archetype, and in a manner of speaking. And so, but the big thing is that Avalokiteshvara may be a woman or a man, doesn't matter, but has thousands of arms. You might have seen them. Right there. There's Avalokiteshvara right there on the wall, and standing up over here. So thousands of arms and many heads, and in each hand it has an eye. In fact, in terms of legend, the Avalokiteshvara is covered with eyes. And so thousands of hands to help. And which I thought, when we talk about this, I thought, well, that's at least bizarre. It's kind of bizarre. And no, I don't understand. What is that about? So at this conference I was at in Hawaii, the man said, Avalokiteshvara has all these helping hands and eyes so that he or she can enter into every situation and bring liberation. In other words, into our suffering, any suffering whatsoever can be a gateway to freedom, to release. Oh, and to get back to my point, I thought I was finished, but I'm not quite yet. That it is in the suffering itself where awakening resides. Think about it. If you're going along and everything is just fine and wonderful, what? There's no awakening in that. It's like learning. Learning doesn't come so much from success; it comes from failure, right? So, within the suffering itself, the word for it is klesha. Isn't that it's like a grating, glass smashing sound? Klesha. Within the kleshas themselves, the stuff that is so unpleasant to us, is the seed of bodhi, is the seed of awakening. And so the trick is to approach that the kleshas, the suffering, with that accepting mind, with open mind. And I suspect you know how hard that is. I think one of the things the Buddha was most good at was showing us how difficult it is to transform suffering into awakening. It's so difficult. Like being in the throes of any addiction. Almost impossible, but not quite. All right. I think that's all I have to say. Are there any questions?
I understand well. I'm hearing what you're saying about entering into states, and forgive me if I'm paraphrasing it incorrectly, but entering into states of non-discrimination when you don't make judgment on the events around you, you just witness them. And I'm wondering, at what times do you bring judgment in and say, what's going on around here is wrong, and I have to try to do something about it, versus I'm not going to have a judgment of what's going on right now.
So if you're sitting, and all of a sudden you notice the candle has set fire to the room, that's when you do something.
I'm thinking more in a ethics sort of way. You're witnessing a behavior or a government where the action is oppressive and harmful to a lot of people. When do you just not have judgment about that versus when do you step in and say, and I think it gets involved with the whole engaged Buddhism thing too.
Oh.
When you say the situation that's going on right now is immoral and it is harmful, and I need to step in and take some action to counter it, versus I'm not going to make a judgment about what's going on around me.
They're really kind of different, aren't they?
It seems like they're different, but maybe I'm missing the point.
Well, engaged Buddhism is a really cool thing. And it doesn't depend on judgmentalism or non-judgmentalism. It depends on what you see is going on and what's appropriate. The appropriate response. Some people go and sit at San Quentin while execution's happening. Some people are social workers. Anything to help ease the pain of others. And I think, at least for me, the kind of practice takes care of what needs to be taken care of in myself, so that I can be of use to others. The thing about engaged Buddhism, which I think is really important, and for Buddhism in this country, I think it's a great gift that we are providing Buddhism, which is that when you sit and you have a spiritual practice, it's not just for yourself to become more peaceful or placid or kind or blah, 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 but it's to actually do something, to be of effect in the society that you live in for good. We do this for the benefit of all beings, after all. And what does that mean? But I have to start, I think, well, there's one way, there's a couple ways to look at it. One is, there's one way to look at it. We help others by first helping ourselves, and we help ourselves by first helping others. And we live in that.
Yeah, I really struggle with it. It's like, I can really understand your point. I mean, we live in right now, unfortunately, we live in a highly polarized times where there's judgments and opinions all over the place. Everybody has them. And they're very strong, and there's a lot of emotion behind them. And on one level, at one point I can see, yeah, it'd be great to step outside of that and just be in a space of witnessing without passing judgments or trying to respond to judgments and so on. But on another level, I mean, I'm part of the polarized process, I guess, because I see a society and culture right now that's going down a very dangerous, I think, scary path, willfully, through what I think is a web of deceit that's being given out. I don't want to get too much into political talk, but then I see this, and I'm thinking, wow, well, maybe this is a time where you have to make a stand and say, wow, this is wrong, and I have to take an action to do that, which involves making a judgment.
Oh, yes. No, Buddhism's not about losing your mind, right? All I was saying about discriminatory thinking is that I don't need to hone it. I mean, I don't need to make it any stronger, particularly, I don't think. What I need is some balance. Because, when has it not been thus, You read the paper and, oh gosh, anybody who's lived, for over 50 years, we've been here before. In a student of history, this is not new. No, you don't want to lose your mind. Your discriminative faculty. That's not the point. The point is being able to become a compassionate person, to be able to stand the suffering of others, so that you can stand your own suffering, so that you can maybe do something to help them.
I understand that your point that the suffering can be a gateway to liberation, but how do you really transform it? What will be the kind of technique or the tool you can use to turn the perceived suffering into something more than that?
See, you don't transform it. I think that's it's the you, the I part, that got me into this mess. The one that thinks I can control. I don't mean to say this personally, but I can control this. I can work with this. I must do something better. I'm doing something wrong. What's the right thing? I can control this. I can apply this technique. That's a good start, but it won't help so much. So the suffering, I don't want to make too fine a point of it, but the suffering actually, when accepted, transforms you. Like my mother died. My mother died 5 years ago. That was a really, let's see, I'd never experienced that before, obviously. And but I was able, thank goodness, to be there to say the right things to her. That she wanted me to always say, but I never did, because I was mean. But I told her all the things I said to her that I knew she wanted to hear. And then when I left the room, then she died. I think we probably had a deal there. She was waiting for me, perhaps. But at any rate, one doesn't get over. I didn't do anything to make that into a really good thing for me. It changed me. It changed me. When I think of the stuff. Well, God, you think of things that you've been through that have been just horrendous. The first impulse is to, well, you know the pattern, be in shock, and then, nah, this isn't happening. And then, wait a minute, it is, and I hate it, anger. And then, oh no, despair. You know. But then, after going through those in one way or another, then comes acceptance. It's, oh yes, it did happen, didn't it? It did happen. What the hell is this? So to be able to, number one, acknowledge the actual suffering. For years, one of my teachers would say, can you stand what you're feeling? Can you stand to feel what you're feeling? Well, no, I can't. Because it hurts. And I want to do everything I can not to feel this. But over the years, I may have seen the logic of her thought and have been able to feel. So I think the thing is that all you can do is to be there for it, to acknowledge that actually something has happened, something horrible, and to then begin to let it be for you. Does that make sense? Instead of resisting it or trying to put it in a box, trying to control it, trying to understand it. Do you know? I mean, really on a raw level. I think acceptance is all we can do. And it changes us. It transforms us. We become a different person.
One of the, sort of another tangential point to this discussion, I guess for me, when I think about compassion and Buddhist awareness, I don't know quite what else to call it, but when I think about Avalokiteshvara and that way of looking at things, it always seems to be very immediate. And meditation seems to always lead me back to a place of being aware of just what's happening in the moment. But in this society particularly, I guess in all societies maybe, there is also the whole problem of time. There are all these books out there that say, begin with the end in mind, and look at what will happen over time. Look at where your action now will lead in the future. And it seems that there's a real difficulty for me in reconciling that with the kind of awareness that comes through meditation. I can be non-judgmental in the moment and say, all right, I accept what happens. But at some point I have to, it seems necessary, given the world that I live in, that I also have to think about time and consequences and where things go. And then it seems that I'm trapped instantly because I, of course, do not have the mind of God. I don't know what the consequences absolutely have to be. I don't know that they necessarily follow. But if I refuse to look at them and say things will just happen as they happen, then that also seems to be somehow too passive or avoidant in some other way, defective in some other way. And I'm wondering, you having done a great deal more meditation, I imagine, than I have at Tassajara, how you work that out. Clearly in an environment like Tassajara, the long-term things are probably more basic, laying in the food supplies and stuff through the winter. But
well, that's really messy, isn't it? What you're describing. What I wonder, where did all this come from? About, I think the present is overrated. Have you ever met anybody who is limited to the present? Have you? There is. It's a disorder. It's mental illness where they don't have no past and they have no future. They just completely live in the present, so that everything that happens is brand new. This is not a fun thing, I think. There's almost like this, unless you're in the present, there's something wrong, you're not doing it right, or, and I don't think so. One of the things that Dogen Zenji says is quietly explore these causes and conditions. In other words, where the hell has your life come from? What you can trust is not what you think or what you plan, or what should be, but what actually, you can trust your actual life. What has happened? What behavior have you actually, what do you do? What do you do? And based on that, you remember the past, and certainly have to, you plan for the future because you're a responsible human being, right? I think through meditation, you know that you don't have to believe any of it. Geez, most of my life has been planned for me, and none of it has turned out even remotely the way I had planned it. Thank goodness, I'm really happy about that. But I guess that gave me the faith that, or the trust that, yes, you do plan for the future responsibly, and knowing that doesn't really mean much more than that. That it can go any way. And like the tiniest decision, so-called decision that I make now, you know that it will veer you off. A teeny tiny decision here goes off that way, and your whole life has changed. So plan away. And it's a good thing. Planning is a good thing. Just like remembering is a good thing. Yeah. But not to take it too seriously, I think.
For me, I find it useful to separate the ideas of pain and suffering. Because for me, for example, like a marathon runner training might experience a lot of physical pain, but he doesn't have that, he's not adding anything mental to it to turn it into suffering. And to me, the same thing like with illnesses, with losses of friends or whatever. I think to be able to directly face the pain of that and move through it, to me that's not the same as being transformed by suffering.
Yes. There is that thing that where in life we just have affliction, we have pain, we have loss. Well, Buddha mentioned, many getting what we don't want, losing what we want, things like that. And then we say, so those like for example, I have a toothache. I don't really, but if I did, then that would hurt. That would hurt a lot. And to compound it, I hate it, and my body tightens up, and I get very irritable. So one way of looking at it, the so-called suffering part is extra, the hating it and the tightening up and all. And I think that's a good model, actually, because things do happen. And if we would just leave it at that and kind of enter into the actual pain of the situation, it would be a really cool thing. But oftentimes there actually in Buddhism there's a definite series of events that happens where self becomes. This is where self comes in. This is where ego is made. I hate this. Who hates this? I hate this. So that a real strong sense of I. And if it gets too bad, then let's see. First it's what can I do? What can I ingest? What sense thing can I do to make this go away? Oh, pills. Okay, yes, good. Whoops, didn't work. And then comes the establishment of self. I hate this. But then if it gets really bad, I hate this really bad, and I look for non-being, suicide, oblivion, that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's the typical Buddhist way of facing pain. But the Buddha also says something a little different, and he says that the actual events themselves are suffering, not just our reaction to them, even though that's part of it, but old age, sickness, and death. Old age, sickness, and death. Anybody else find old age, sickness, and death an affliction? Oh, there's one. There's two. Yeah. Yeah. So he says that not only your reaction to them, but the things themselves have to be accepted completely. So, but that's a good model. Right.
I read once that Thomas Jefferson said at the end of his life that he really could not see the point of too much grief. Is that he had lost all but one of his children, his wife had died. And the occasion of repeated grief was not a flower that continued to unfold wisdom for him. It just seemed like being bludgeoned. And I know many people in this room have experienced too much grief that they did not seem to teach anymore. Do you think that's true? That feels true to me, that after a certain point, I stopped learning from so much grief. And I was sort of in that electrified rat mode, just acquired capacity.
What? Electrified, is it?
You know, if they put rats in a
yes.
grid, and once they find they can't get out, they just lay down.
Yes. Yes. They give up?
Yeah, and just lay down and get shocked.
Yes. Yes.
Sort of a mammalian response.
I think that's the way we can be. I think the giving, the despair is a point of view. And I think, the first thing that comes to my mind is detachment. But boy, I really don't mean coldness. Because what you're describing, these things, the impact is real, of real events. This is life. This is real life. Well, at least in my life, I've found that the practice has given me a trust that goes against all of my egocentric logic. That let's see. I don't know how to say what I feel about that. It's like this. Enough is enough, and it is enough. Enough is enough, and I want to die. That's a different point of view. Gosh, does that make any sense?
No, I see.
I think I don't know what to say. I want to say, I think a spiritual practice gives us the strength to withstand anything. But since I haven't experienced everything, I'm willing to say that.
Many of us are getting older, and I'm wondering if you've heard any discussion of the possibility of some contemplative community that might be an idea or forming, or if there's been any discussion. I've looked for groups of people who have meditated for a long time. We don't seem to come together in small clumps, but there's never been a large. Ramdas hasn't set us up yet with that.
Well, I don't keep up so much where I live. So I think, like even for Zen Center, this is beginning to become a real thing. Like, what are they going to do with people like me? Because there aren't too many. It's beginning to happen. This Zen Center. So I think that's a new ground for breaking, actually. Some kind of housing to keep us from drooling and things. But I think we probably won't do anything. We won't do anything unless we have to. You know how things happen. How institutions change. They have changed when they can no longer stand not to. So I think I would suspect then that if you get people together and talk about these things, at least that's how I see it happens. Big changes.
We've thrown the idea out, but so far it just seems so complex. It takes money and organization, a lot of other things. But the idea's out there.
Yeah, right.
If you think about it, then maybe we can get together.
Yeah. I think, at least what I've seen is that all it takes is often just maybe one person, two people, with a will that won't quit, and who can inspire others, it's amazing what happens. What do you think?
Not time in the process.
Huh? And not die, you say?
In the process.
Is that all? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that wisdom. On maybe a more mundane level, do we have any announcements today?
Well, I have my little announcement that I made last week too. This is for people who weren't there last week, and it's not GBF related, so my apologies. I have a book launching party for a book that Bruein has come out, and it's on March 9th. And I have flyers for people who are interested. So I'd like to have a nice attendance if possible.
Who's our host today? I forgot. Hi, Francis.
There will be cookies and tea. Please wash your cup. Please leave money in the Don bowl. Let's see. If anyone wants to go to lunch afterwards, you can go to lunch. That's about it. Leave no crumbs. We don't want any mouse to survive here. I say that, although I personally disagree with that.
And the dining bowl.
I mentioned it.
I was
Now,
looking at
if
the
we
door.
mention it twice.
Yes, please do. Speaking of books, Roger Corliss's book, Vision of Buddhism, we're having a discussion group. We're reading the book, and he's talking about it. And the next meeting is Wednesday, March 10th. At my place, if you're interested, let me get your name and email address.
What day is March 10th?
Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday, and that's the evening?
Yeah.
There's a sign-up sheet out by the Don Bowl if anyone wants to give us your email number or an address for the newsletter.
Yes, George.
A reminder that our talks are available on the internet at the GBF website, gaybuddhist.org. Also, recently our ISP has increased our partition size, so that now allows us to have available upwards of 50 talks online.
You can listen to them all at once. Well, let's stand and gather in a circle. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, and live believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.